because other people have made those mistakes. Take advantage of the fact that somebody else made the mistake and try to learn from that, I think is important.
Welcome back to the Collision Vision podcast, driven by Auto Body News, for another episode in our series on choosing, sourcing, and financing the right equipment. Today, we're joined by Bill Keys, a seasoned industry veteran and Midwest division manager at Hunter Engineering Company. If you've ever wondered when it makes sense to bring alignments or ADAS calibration in-house, or how to calculate ROI on your next big equipment purchase, or even how to finance those investments without compromising your cash flow, this episode is for you. We're going to explore how the best operators make smart, scalable equipment decisions and why your next investment might just be the key to unlocking growth, efficiency, and better profitability within your operation. Enjoy the show. This episode is brought to you by Hunter Engineering. Today, alignments and ADAS calibrations are two sides of the same coin. If a shop is doing one, it may as well do the other. Unfortunately, many collision shops aren't doing either, but they can start right away with Hunter Engineering's new HawkEye Elite Xpandable configuration. HawkEye Elite X is a world-class alignment and ADAS system that's expandable to Hunter's ultimate ADAS for laser-guided static calibrations. Future-proof your business by keeping alignments in-house now and upgrading to calibrations as soon as you're ready. Enjoy the show. Bill, thank you so much for joining us here on the Collision Vision.
Hi, you're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Looking forward to an awesome conversation. I wish we had hit record a few minutes earlier because we're just sitting here talking about ADAS and the industry and all the exciting stuff happening. So figured it was time to go ahead and share our conversation. Before we do, would love to hear a little bit about yourself and your background in your own words.
Oh, great. Yeah. So started working on cars when I was 18 years old. I worked for a company out of upstate New York. Worked for them for about 20 years, nearly 20 years. And then moved on to Hunter and have been in the commercial equipment business now since 2001 in a variety of different areas. Started in Detroit, and I was there for 12 years, which got me a lot of great experience working with the OEMs and some of the challenges that they had. And then I moved to California to see the other coast after originally being an East Coast guy, and spent 12 years there, and now I'm back here in the Midwest. So I'm in the western side of Ohio and back in kind of my old area, if you would say.
There we go. So for anyone watching on video, they will see a San Francisco 49ers helmet back there. Was that adopted during your time on the West Coast, or did you have an East Coast team? Tell me about your sports allegiance there.
It's interesting. I purchased that in like 1995 while I was living in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Oh, of course.
As we all know, Montana's a Pennsylvania boy. So it's just was a favorite quarterback of mine. So I got it then and have carried it from everywhere.
I love it, man. It feels like for my generation, no matter where you were from, you grew up having Denver Broncos stuff during the Elway era. So I love it.
It's the quarterback. You know, I also suffered through living in Detroit when they were 0-16 at one point in time. So I've seen the ups and downs of football teams along the way. But
I love it. Well, I was a Detroit fan just via Matt Stafford after his UGA days, but we won't get into that. This is not a sports podcast for better or worse.
That's a different day.
We are going to talk equipment, and I don't think too many folks out there more qualified to help us talk about that. So first, I want to kind of dive into how to go about thinking about and choosing the right equipment. What are some of the biggest mistakes that shop owners make when it comes to making equipment decisions?
Sure. I think in these days, you know, with the internet and all, I think that they tend to do better research than maybe they did in the past. But sometimes that research ends there, you know, and tangibly you haven't really seen the equipment or see how it operates. So the thing I encourage with everybody, whether it's replacing an old piece of equipment or maybe they're thinking about getting into a new segment of business, is to see it in person, you know, to whether whether it comes to your shop and it's put in action right there at the shop, or you go to a trade show, or in many cases, industry people know industry people, right? So maybe they can go to one of their buddies' shops and see how things operate, and maybe get some feedback from them. So I guess the thing I would encourage the most is not to just shortcut it at what you can read on the internet or what you get from marketing brochures and stuff like that. So I definitely encourage getting in front of the equipment.
Super important, right? Demos, customer testimonials from folks who have actually used the stuff that you're looking to use, I think makes total sense. Are there any processes or resources out there that you would recommend, kind of a one-stop shop folks can use to do some of that research, even if it is the online portion, before they get out in the field and see it for themselves?
Sure. The interesting, and obviously I work for a Hunter Engineering company, but we have a vast learning channel on YouTube, which isn't always directed exactly at the piece of equipment, but also the techniques, or what are we trying to fix, whether it's resurfacing rotors on the car or on up to what we're covering these days, which is ADAS, and what actually happens when you try to reset an ADAS system, and you get to see those steps and begin to learn and think about how that would fit into your shop, and your business. So I think that's a great place to go. Anything you can do to just kind of increase that knowledge base that you have, I think that alone will help limit the mistakes that you make, because other people have made those mistakes. Take advantage of the fact that somebody else made the mistake and try to learn from that, I think is important.
No question about it. Well, I was in the equipment industry for 6 years. I grew up around it, and something that I saw that was a constant of some of the best salespeople in the space and the best brands in the space were, if you need a Toyota level piece of equipment, you don't need a Ferrari. If you need a Ferrari, you don't need something else. And I think kind of realizing what you need makes a ton of sense. What kinds of questions should operators be asking themselves before they make an equipment purchase?
I think that's a great statement. And with ADAS being kind of the new thing on the block these days, I think you have to stop and ask yourself what vehicles are coming into your place, right? What kind of age of the vehicles that are crossing your bay doors? Do you do mostly Toyota? Do you do mostly the domestics? Things like that. Because when you get into ADAS, for example, there's so many different targets, and it seems like there's no crossover, right? Everybody's got their own target and has their own procedure. So, I mean, you can spend thousands of dollars just on targets for maybe vehicles that you just don't see in your shop, Cole, sure. and they sit there. So that's kind of important. When it comes to lifting capacity, maybe for an alignment rack, what kind of vehicles are you doing there? What length do you have a good truck market? So do you need a longer rack? Do you need a higher capacity rack? You've got good commercial business, vehicles coming in all loaded up with plumbing supplies and stuff like that. I think those are the things, whether it's a 2-post rack or an alignment rack, or, your AC equipment, what kind of vehicles are you working on? So I think that's pretty important. Probably first number one question to ask yourself. And then you have to begin to budget yourself, figure out, what do you expect to get out of this? And what do you hope to pay to get yourself into it?
Well, a great segue into the ROI conversation. But before I do, I sort of misasked that question, but it worked out. I meant Toyota versus Ferrari, sort of in a silver, gold, platinum, not necessarily the brands, but the brands actually worked out perfectly. So I love when that happens. From an ROI perspective, I know that's something that Hunter has historically been really good. We wrapped Hunter back in our day, and in my day, they still do. How do you recommend going about kind of thinking about and calculating that return on investment for equipment like alignment racks or ADAS calibration systems?
Sure. Well, that may actually help cover the end of that question that you were hoping to get to in a good, better, best scenario, right? So I think when you're looking at an ROI and what you're hoping to make out of this investment that you make, is we always start with what the investment number is, right? So then we try to peel that away by how much do you make per vehicle? What are you going to have to pay a technician to do it? Where are you going to get your traffic from if it's a new market? Maybe you haven't been in alignments before. Maybe you don't do brake work currently. So where's that market going to come from? How long is it going to take you to develop that market? That may control a little bit, Cole, on what you spend up front, right? So if you're presented with a good, better, best as far as the scenarios go, maybe you're walking in with better instead of best until you develop your market, because equipment certainly can always be upgraded.
No question. No, it makes total sense. And you mentioned specifically, and I guess I did as well, two functions within the shop that are sort of some of the functions that we most often see outsourced, and that is alignments and calibrations.
Yeah.
At what point, when you're speaking with prospects or clients, does it make sense to consider bringing those capabilities in-house?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I actually, going to my California days, I had an interesting dealership that I went to, and Cole, they didn't even understand, I think, how much they spent to outsource it, right? And it was a January, February situation, and I think they spent over 20 grand to outsource ADAS calibrations, and they were closing in on 40 for February. So at that point in time, you start adding the numbers together, and you're like, gosh, there's a couple reasons you should do it here. Anytime you outsource something, you're taking your reputation and you're using somebody else to help identify that, right? So you hope that everybody does things as well as you would, but you can't always guarantee it, right? The other thing is just, especially in these days where it's so hard to get technicians, it seems like every place I go into, they're running shorthanded. So now you're going to outsource something, right? So now you got to take two guys. You got one guy to drive the car that's getting fixed, somebody to bring him back. And then you got to do that again when the vehicle's done. And I don't know if it's a fault of where you're outsourcing it to or not. It doesn't always get put at the front of the line when it makes it to the outsourced place. So now you're kind of at the mercy of what's going on at that other shop and when you get it back and when did you promise it to your customer and things like that. And then just the money, I mean, if you could make $100 per alignment and you're spending $80, $70 to have it outsourced, you're just really cutting down on the potential of your shop.
I think that's a great point. It's so tempting to be exclusively quantitative when it comes to an ROI and equipment purchase, but that reputation piece for your sublet vendors is you can't really overstate the importance of that. Additionally, some other things along the lines of throughput, efficiency, and margin impact when you're assessing bringing this stuff in-house makes a huge difference. So it's reputation, it's an impact to the top line and the bottom line. I think the big question a lot of folks have is, for many, many years, we were told you can't bring ADAS in-house unless you have X, whether it's space, conditions, anything of that nature. Who would you say can and cannot bring ADAS calibration in-house as it stands today?
I think we're seeing more and more opportunities where we can bring it in-house. There's probably three different footprints, kind of like a modest footprint and then a little bit bigger and then the extreme. There's some vehicles on the road that take a tremendous amount of space. But when you look at those footprints, you probably can do 85% of the static stuff in a modest footprint. And we encourage people to get a little more creative with that space that they use. If you're trying to recalibrate a camera on a driver's side mirror, you can always move the vehicle, to the right side of the bay that you're in. If you're doing a rear camera, bring the car into the bay further or back the car into the bay. There's many ways to kind of slice that up. You're not typical. I've only seen a couple operations where we've had to recalibrate 3 or 4 items on a particular car. It was from a collision shop. But typically you can get pretty creative with that space. Levelness of the floor always comes up. I just did a seminar last week, and that was a big question, was how level does our floor need to be? Just speaking for our equipment, of course, but we approach it like we do an alignment machine. When we hook the sensors up to the vehicle, we're actually checking out how level is the floor that we're on. And we're not doing it to say, hey, you need to move this to another spot. We're going to take however out of level it is, and we're going to compensate in that for the system setting the targets after that. So So to answer that question shorter, I think it's gotten better. I spent my time in California working with Honda. Honda takes the most space, just because of some of the processes that they do for it. So it's the tippy top of the space taker for sure.
We talked about some maybe notions that we got from when this industry was in its true infancy. I think a lot of folks could argue that it still is in the early innings on requirements and outlook for the space. And it's easy to hear something a decade ago and just assume that a lot of what was true then remains true today, when it does not necessarily mean that's the case.
Yeah. I mean, there's vehicles on the road, as we move through the different companies that we've gotten our OEM approval from, where I can do many of their systems right on the alignment rack, for example, Cole. So here I am, I'm already in the alignment bay. I've done the alignment, which I always recommend before we do any kind of ADAS calibration, whether the OEM calls for it or not. You want to have the vehicle going straight down the road first. So I think that's important. And do it right there in the alignment bay, which is an awesome spot. So you've done the alignment. Now you just move into whether you're doing a forward-facing camera or forward-facing radar, do the whole project, print it all out, and then move on to the next car. So I think the space thing is getting better.
All right. And I know ADAS is the hot topic. I do want to spend a little bit of time on alignment. I know back in my time in and around the Hunter ecosystem, there was a lot of talk about collision alignments and getting insurance to pay and all of that stuff. What are you seeing in terms of adoption for alignments among collision centers? A stat before you answer that always stuck out to me was that alignments are often the most profitable thing on a dealer's service drive. Yes. And those guys know how to make money. And so should we be doing more of this in collision repair?
We do. We definitely encourage that a lot more than we had. My background is not in collision, but I will tell you that we put together a system and a piece of software, and we call it a collision blueprint. So there's many other things that insurance companies are looking at when they are making decisions on doing an alignment, and we take those into account. Where how's the body positioned on the actual chassis, offset in axles and different wheelbase lengths and stuff like that. But the other thing that I encourage with some of our body shop customers, there's a quick button on a Hunter alignment machine where you can park a car in front of it and just roll it and see what the camber, caster, and tow is on it real quickly, kind of like a quick check, if you will. And it is so much easier to sell an insurance company an alignment on this vehicle than it is to argue about it when you're just trying to button this thing up and deliver it back to the customer, right? It ends up in that kind of that ping pong match at the end, who's going to pay for it. And I think it's just a better service for the collision customer. You've taken a pretty good impact. There's a good chance things aren't quite right. Let's check it out first, and we can handle that. Instead of an emergency at the end, we can handle it in the repair process.
Makes total sense. Great input and feedback there. I want to talk about paying for this equipment. I think a lot of small business owners, for better or worse, generally love the idea of paying cash, but there are a lot of options out there that go far beyond that. What are some typical financing opportunities available for body shops when it comes to purchasing equipment?
Sure, that's a great question. There's always some sort of incentive out there for capital equipment where you can get equipment as low as 0% for 12 months, right? And some of this is equipment, whether it's alignment that we're talking about, Cole, you can pay for a piece of equipment in a 12-month period, doing 1 or 2 alignments a day. So if you can use, I know some folks love to use cash, right? But if you can use somebody else's money for 0 or a pretty low interest, I think it makes better business sense, to do that, because throughout a 12-month period, you just don't know what's going to happen in your shop, right? It could be the roof error, it could be the sewer, it could be something else that doesn't necessarily make you money. So why not use that 0% 12-month type of deal, or even a 24 or 36-month deal to protect your cash flow? I think is a pretty important deal. So you still have the cash coming in.
No question. Again, it goes back to that ROI calculation. What types of companies are doing financing like this for body shops?
Well, we have a great company that we partner with, which is Great America, out of Iowa. They do a great job. They partner with us in order to provide these 0% type of deals. I know that there's a collision cooperatives out there that work together, and sometimes they have finance groups that help them with that. There's many, sometimes too many, Cole, equipment financiers out there. So it's tough to find the right one. I think if you work with the company that you're purchasing the equipment with, they typically have one or two lenders that they work with as well. But you go to like a collision show, maybe a big collision show where they've got many vendors there. They're great opportunities to find lending and cash that way.
Perfect. Nope. I could not agree more, by the way. And understanding you're an equipment guy, not necessarily a finance guy, though. Yeah. I don't know. You could prove me wrong here. Yeah. Any kind of color around how shop owners should factor in depreciation, tax advantages, and that payback period when it comes to their financing decision?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of things. Obviously, a good CPA is always helpful to help you make the right decision. Most pieces of equipment that we deal with is typically like a 5-year depreciation deal, and it has much more impact on the taxes that business is going to pay. So I do think that's something that you want to take into account. You don't want to just sign up, get your piece of equipment, and go on. You want to take advantage of those tax benefits. And for many years now, as we come to the end of a work year, if you'll call it a work year, Section 179 is probably the best to do, because you can take a 50 or 60, your CPA is going to come to you and say, listen, Cole, the podcasts have been going great. You need to buy something, right? And you take a $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 piece of equipment that you could write off most of or all of it in a 1-year period to offset. Maybe you had a great year, in a revenue and a profit standpoint, and help bring that taxable number down. I think that's an important thing to consider. We too often just consider the basics, but behind the scenes, that's what helps you make money and helps you make those kind of investments. So, good point.
When approaching lenders, obviously there's an element of you need to sell them that you're good to pay this money back. What are lenders typically looking for out of clients?
Well, obviously the first thing that they look at is the credit score, right? And then I think the quality of the equipment and the plan that they're looking at. I've had many times, where sometimes people default, so the lending company is going to be a little sketchy about what are you actually purchasing, because sometimes that equipment could belong to the lending company, if things don't go well. So we're going to want to make sure that you got a good plan put together, good quality equipment with warranties and all that kind of stuff. And as far as a good plan put together, who's going to operate it? How's this going to add to your business? Things like that. Most of your lending situations too, from a tax standpoint, work more like a lease, kind of a lease to own, which is very good for your box score. As far as anything else that you may need to purchase in this calendar year, you've got this lease setting out there, but it's not really impacting the fact that now you've got to put 4 garage doors in or something like that. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yep. The lease thing, the dollar buyout kind of traditional structure is a great thing. Absolutely. I know it well. Yeah. And a great option. And typically, are they still requiring kind of 2 years minimum in business?
Yeah. But there are companies and many of your leasing companies. Let's say that you're rebuilding a little bit and you're a little edge maybe on the credit score or something like that. They have ways of, they work with other companies within their group that they can try to get you there. And the same applies to that. You've been in business for 12 months, right? And so you don't fit that 2-year period. What do we do with this company, right? So they work with that pretty well.
Awesome. Yep. Yeah. Typically where there's a will, there's a way. Not always, of course, but I know a lot of companies will work with their A credit folks, and then they got a different company for maybe their B and C credit folks. So a lot of options out there, and kind of heartening to hear if there is a problem with the quantity of lenders out there, it might be that there are too many of them. I think that's a great problem to have.
I think you're right there. And another thing to consider is they're always going to look at it as the business, right, Cole? And that's what they're lending the money to. A lot of times, if you're in that spot where maybe you haven't been in business long enough, they will look at your personal credit too. And if you can sign a personal guarantee, that may help you get into the business that's going to help make you successful, right? You hate for this hurdle to eliminate an opportunity for you to get into a segment that's going to be really, really good for you. Highly profitable, of course.
Makes total sense. The equipment kind of consultant relationship with clients is a really unique one. You get a behind the scenes look. Typically, once you're kind of in, the guard goes way down.
Yeah.
And just like in my experience on the Collision Vision, you get unfiltered access to a lot of really bright minds across the industry. And so I want to ask a couple questions about those guys.
Sure.
How, from an equipment perspective, do some of the best operators that you work with approach planning for equipment or facilities, what have you, as a part of their broader growth strategy?
I think the word that you said there, planning or having a plan, is the biggest difference without question, Cole. Many folks that don't have a plan, it comes up when it's an emergency, right? When it's on fire, or you gotta replace this thing. You don't necessarily get the best deal, right? You can't find the best financing. So the ones that I see, whether it's a single shop owner or they own multiple shops, are the ones that have some sort of CapEx plan, right? They know that their alignment machine is already 7 years old. They know once it gets 8, 9, or 10, it's getting pretty long in the tooth, right? So they're beginning to look before it makes it to that point where, hey, it broke down today. Parts are no longer available for this piece of equipment. Now what do we do? Well, now we've got to make an emergency purchase at possibly a high price, at terrible lending, or you're using up some of your cash flow to do it. So I think just planning ahead, is the best way. If you're a brand new business and there's 5 segments that you could possibly get into, and you're going to get into 3 of them, while you're into 3 trying to make your business go, you should begin to think about those other 2. And when do they become important? When can you afford to get into that type of stuff as you expand your business?
Not necessarily the sexiest advice, but it's awesome advice. Planning ahead, build out that plan, whether that's for your business, for your equipment, or all the above. It's a great thing, and kind of allows you to think about things when it's level-headed, before something's an emergency, before you have to shoot from the hip. You got this plan figured out where you know exactly what's going to happen when the inevitable does come.
Absolutely.
We've talked a lot about kind of newer segments for the collision repair industry, certainly in ADAS, and not a ton of adoption maybe on the alignment side, though that's increasing. Talk to me a little bit about equipment replacement or upgrading. When does upgrading equipment become more about, adding to the customer experience and overall improving your business than maybe just a cost on your P&L?
Sure. I mean, there's many times that you can think about that. You and I, even before the segment today, we talked about, how hard it is to get people, for example. So as we begin to try to rebuild that hands-on type group of folks out there, sometimes we need a piece of equipment that makes it easier, right? So when it comes to the customer experience, like how quick do I get my car back? Do I get it back, without having a wheel that's been scratched or damaged or, something like that? I think getting pieces of equipment that aid your technicians in doing that's going to help the efficiency of the shop. It's going to help your customers be more satisfied. They're not going to have to come back to have it fixed again. The only thing worse than taking your car to get it fixed is having to bring it back and having to sit there and wait again to get it back again. So I think those are pretty important. Just expanding more services for your customer, right? If you're that guy that started out doing 3 segments of different kinds of business in your shop, and they keep saying, hey, can I just get my alignment here? Adding that. So now that you not only retain that customer, but that in itself will be a better experience, I think, for that customer, without question.
No doubt. You mentioned a couple minutes ago, kind of whether you're a single shop owner, a multi-shop owner. I think there's a real listener base here on the Collision Vision where it's an in-between. Maybe it's a single shop owner who's looking to become an MSO, who has that vision for growth. From your perspective, what advice would you give that shop owner who's looking to scale maybe from one location to multiple locations?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a great thing to be able to do that. I mean, you're taking all the skills and effort and investment that you made in one, and you're like, hey, let's duplicate this. So that's probably the biggest thing, is to duplicate it where you can. The market may be a little different where you're moving, but I think if you've got a great plan going on where you're at, and you've made great decisions on equipment and employees and marketing and all that kind of stuff, I think you need to go with that plan under your arm when you go to find this next location and try to do that. What does happen though is you have one location and you got a great bunch of guys, right? And you're like, I'm going to open a new location. I'm going to make Cole the manager. I'm going to take him over there.
Oh, that's your first mistake.
You begin to like thin out your herd a little bit, right? So as you're looking at becoming that MSO, I think proactively you need to build your bench a little bit, right? Get your strength in that shop. Say, hey, I'm going to get a new guy in. Cole's going to work with him for 12 months, and then Cole's going to the new store, and then this guy's going to be well prepared to take over the store that we have now. So I hate to say everything comes back to personnel, but
everything comes back to personnel. Absolutely. I look at a ton of financial statements of shops that are going through exactly that, where maybe for 6 months or 12 months, you're sort of really heavy on payroll for a little bit as you're ramping up to take down that new location. Yeah. And that's called foresight, though. It might be a little heartburny at times, but it's certainly helpful as you end up scaling. Yeah. Very good, man. This has been an absolute pleasure. It's always fun to get back and talk about the equipment space. As we spoke about in our pre-show call, I've had the chance to go to Hunter HQ out in St. Louis on multiple occasions, an amazing facility. There's some super secret parts that I'm not allowed to go into, was never allowed to go into. So a lot going on.
Me either.
They don't there we go. Well, then maybe I don't have to dance around this question so much. You don't. Are there any new technologies coming from Hunter or in the industry at large that you have on your radar that you're excited about and that shop owners should keep on their radar?
I just think more broadly, we've made a lot of steps towards autonomy and ease of use type of things. I think that's going to be a growing space within the equipment. Less interaction with a person to actually do the job that you're doing. For one, I can speak on that because I know that's a theme of ours. But I can also say I know that you're a big fan of SEMA, and I always encourage all of my customers to come to SEMA because it's a great place really to get a future look at some stuff. And selfishly, Hunter always releases the newest at SEMA. It's a big deal for us as well. Whether it's a product or we're just testing you a little bit, it's good to see from all companies all the kinds of stuff that you're going to see, and that's going to help the guy. Going back to the MSO guy, just quickly, he needs to lean on that community of folks that do have multiple locations and just kind of learn from them what are some of the best practices, because having two locations, you already have certain fixed expenses. Now all you're doing is you're working on getting more money coming in. Go to events like SEMA where they have lots of breakout sessions where you can gain knowledge and learn from other multi-store owners and things like that. So some pretty cool stuff. So that's the most I can tell you.
Oh, all right, man. I appreciate very politically correct answer. You're not going to be hearing from Hunter Legal because of anything you said just then. I guarantee it. Very good, man. And you took the words out of my mouth in terms of SEMA. Would echo that. If it's on your radar, if you're thinking about going this year, take the leap. It's worth it. Some really cool stuff going on. Absolutely. Well, Bill, it has been an absolute pleasure, sir. I appreciate you spending some time with us. Where can people, A, get in touch with you, and B, learn about all that Hunter has to offer?
Sure. I mean, www.hunter.com is the best place to go. You'll find all of our product pages there and a lot of learning information. You can even put in your zip code and you'll either get me or you'll get someone just like me in your area, which I always encourage to talk to your local folks and see how they can help you. And last but not least, come to SEMA. I'll be there every single day. And if you're a dealer out there, come to NADA. We'll be there as well. And it's a great time for us to to chat. You're not in your environment. You're not trying to answer the phone, or you got, all these cars going on. That's the other thing. That's the beautiful thing about some of these trade shows, is you really can learn a lot. And frankly, we learn a lot there too, just from talking to customers.
Always a good time, always a crazy time. Bill, appreciate it a ton. It's been an awesome time catching up, and thank you for joining us on the Collision Vision.
Yep, and I appreciate the Collision Vision and your time and efforts, and helping to educate the public. So whatever we can do to help.
That wraps up our conversation with Bill Keys of Hunter Engineering. As we heard today, equipment strategy is not just about the tools. It's about aligning your investments with your shop's growth, operational goals, and future readiness. Whether you're a single location shop thinking about your first alignment machine, or a growing MSO evaluating capital deployment, understanding ROI and financing options is critical. That is all for today's episode of the Collision Vision. If you enjoyed it, please hit that follow button wherever you enjoy your podcast and leave us a review. And do me a personal favor, if you would, and give us a share with your network to see if somebody out there might be benefited by this information, just like you hopefully were. As always, on behalf of the Auto Body News team and myself, thank you for coming along for the ride.